All right, what do we think? Religion in the 21st century will be judged by the
Thank you, Clarence.
the benefits it brings to its non-adherents. All right, go in peace. Yeah, Jim.
If you're just talking about bringing benefits to your adherents, you're talking about a tribal thing. And as soon as you get in a tribal thing, you're headed down a certain road, and you're going to be in conflict with other tribes.
Yeah.
Or at best, maybe an institution out to survive kind of thing.
Yeah, self-preservation.
Or its own self-preservation.
All right. Yeah.
I think if you're going to, if you can't bring people in by going out and talking to them, I don't think it works very well. I mean, you can, but it doesn't happen very often. What works is when the community sees you and sees you doing positive things in the community, then they start to go, what are you from again? And where are you? What are your beliefs? And that's when they ask the questions rather than you give them their spiel, they're more likely to receive you. And whether they believe or not or end up being part of your church, at least they know you're there.
Yeah.
Other people that are curious about what you're about, you have a new spokesperson.
Right.
And it helps the community, which every church should do anyway.
Yeah. Other thoughts, insights?
I think we're all benefits of the generosity of the Methodist Church. So we're the, yeah,
We're going to send them this clip.
yeah. No, I mean, like,
We don't have an applause light, but we have Dan Hensley. Yeah, go on, John. Is that all you wanted to say?
I mean, it seems like a very selfless thing for them to do.
Yeah.
Because this is not a gateway to go across the street.
Right.
I don't think. I don't know, maybe some people have made that walk, but I'm not planning to.
Me either. Yeah, absolutely. So I think that's an interesting sort of legacy, right? That we've, in some senses, we're talking about such radical reform that we're acknowledging that as much as we ever think we've got it, that we're always in need of asking the next question and reforming again, but that we actually come from an institution that's so self-giving that it made it possible for us to get started. It's a pretty neat legacy. Yeah, Heather.
So what I think we bring to the community is we bring critical thought of biblical dogma. So we have, within this community, we think about those things in an open and non-judgmental and critical way.
Yeah.
And I think because we have connections to Stetson, because we have many Stetson students here and faculty here as well. So I think that message diffuses into academia, into what once was a very rigid, dogmatic Christian environment, which is now very, very open and willing to be challenged environment. And I think that by spreading that into the community, we're hoping to make Christianity great again.
You all have been great. Thank you. Have a good night.
We need bumper stickers.
No, we don't. Oh.
Depends how you start reading.
Yeah. Oh, wow. Yeah, I remember early on having this conversation with Mike Furlong about how, the typical model for starting a church, you always, you sort of assess the community, you assess the needs, and then the church that's starting, it's a very divided understanding of like there's the church and then whatever the church does to serve the community. And so like we're starting this new church, we're going to serve the homeless, and that's going to sort of be the thing that generates some buzz about the good that we're doing, so we can get people to come to the church, which is a whole different thing from serving. And so early on, I was kind of asking him, we were kind of thinking through what that was, and I was like, the homeless thing is pretty well taken care of. Obviously, we're not fixing the problem of homelessness, but in terms of living mercifully and feeding people that are hungry, there's tons of churches around that are doing stuff that that feed the homeless and things like that. And we were kind of thinking about what some of the other things are in the area, and he kind of said, I think the thing that we're doing is creating places that are safe to have these conversations, that aren't safe to have anywhere else. And to your point, not just conversations where we pretend to ask a question, but we've already got the answer sort of in our back pocket. Those are really popular and they work in a lot of cases, but conversations like Pints and Parables, where we offer some sort of stimulus for conversation and directly say there's not a prescribed meaning to this. So this is going to mean a lot of things to a lot of different people, and it's okay that we don't all arrive at the same place. It's working to kind of be on that the journey of asking the questions together. That's the important thing. Yeah, Jerry.
The demographic here, I don't know if it's all collected because there's more going on outside, but to me the demographic is very interesting and very telling. In parishes I've been in, I said, well, who gets neglected? Of the people that go to the church, who gets neglected? Young married couples, to a certain extent. Children are taken care of. We got things for children. We got things for teenagers. We might have an outreach to a campus somewhere, a person
Right.
talking to college students. But the quarter life and the midlife people, I don't think get paid much attention. It's like, oh, they're good, they're fine, they're on automatic pilot, But people looking for deeper questions about, I'm alive, I got a job, I got kids, and blah, blah, blah. And I'm not, desperate, but I am dry, I am lost. I am like, what's next?
Yeah.
And so I found in the workplace where I was, I found myself relating to older 20-somethings, 30-somethings. I said, they got the same questions I do. That's it. Wake up, go to sleep, work, get money, go to the kids, blah, blah, blah. But there's more to living,
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, John.
We better be prepared. Today, I was at Soup Kitchen, and a couple came in that were strung out.
Yeah.
And I saw one girl weeks ago that was strung out, but I really didn't get a chance to talk to her. But this couple I did, and the guy, the girl was he couldn't talk to her, but the guy said that he was a foster child and saw a lot of abuse.
Yeah.
And that foster parents would abuse the girls more than the guys. And I was just like, what a wonderful system, why can't we make it better and screen these abusive parents out of the system?
Yeah.
But, what do you say to somebody that's strung out,
Yeah.
And another guy told me what they were on, meth, and they had been up for 6 nights, but he denied it. He said he was on something else.
Yeah. Well, I think part of one of the things we talked a lot about this weekend is the recognition that as valuable as this is to the people that are in the room, a collective service isn't going to help somebody that's addicted in that way. And so how can we leverage the power of bringing people together to do what Freddie does, which is to hold the structures and systems that exist accountable, like you said, to be better. And I think in some sense, if we look at the stuff that we're doing that benefits non-adherence, having the Autism Center, the way that we support recovery ministry, who for the most part, the people who come here for recovery work don't come to services on Sunday night. So it's I think acknowledging there are needs beyond what can be met by coming to collective services. And this is great. This is valuable in our community groups for the people that are a part of it. But I think we also all know there are ways that we can leverage the assets and the resources that we have to help people who are never going to come in the room. And we're not expecting that. And that's, we don't want to be a part of giving backhanded gifts where we're, trying to help people so that they come and be like us. No, why? Let's see what people need. And if we can help meet that need, we do it. Thoughts, questions? What do you think, Kathy?
I think a lot of stuff.
You do.
One of the things that I think is interesting and valuable is the fact that you don't have to be in this room at any point in time. And the fact that there are more things that are not mandatory than there are things that are mandatory. And we have the power to leverage choice and voice. We can, in this space, have independent and collective thought, and it's all valued. I'm much like Dan, I was like, what, there's music and there's a discussion? I thought that was just what went on during the holidays. I still couldn't figure out when the offering was. But I know, right?
Have you heard about our pledge drive?
But being able to be in a space where the community statement isn't just read, it's actually lived in this room. And when it's alive in us, when we go from this place, it's still alive in us. And so I think that that pretty much adds value. And the community isn't just limited to the people who are in the room. It's not just limited to the people who are 3 or 4 blocks over in either direction. It's really global because people can find us. That's how I found y'all. Y'all couldn't hide. But being able to join from where you are, literally and figuratively, I believe adds a tremendous amount of value.
Yeah, absolutely. We had, it was neat for the Brian McLaren event this weekend. We had sort of different distances of collective people who were able to engage. We had the live stream on Saturday, and so we had Shanti, who found us through a Peter Rollins event 2 years ago, who used to live in St. Augustine and is now in Sweden, who bought a ticket for the Saturday event so she could tune in live from Sweden to go to the event. And then Sarah and Terry, who live in St. Augustine, who drove down for the Friday thing but then couldn't come back, so they tuned in Saturday to be a part of that. And the number of stories of people who were involved in that way. And the people who were involved who said, oh my gosh, this is amazing, I need to share this link with my friends, and I can shoot an email to people who are all over the country, all over the world, and have them be involved in what's going on. And it was neat to see the nature of the questions of people who were in the room for the first time who had never been exposed to this. It was kind of crazy. Like Brian McLaren is here doing his thing, and he's written all these books, and he's got all this wisdom. And some of the questions we were getting were like, if I was new in town, how would I get involved in Collective? What would I do? How would I, like, ask Brian a question. But it's neat. I think it was a reminder that that what we're doing is important and people are interested in not, it's interesting, like the old phrase like church shopping, where it's really commodified and it's a product. The sense I keep getting now is less and less that people are looking to find the thing where they can just come and sit in the room and be comfortable, and they're really interested in how they are actively involved in a community. I think it seems like that's the thing that's missing.
I will also throw out there that I noticed something this weekend. I've known that we did it, but I thought this was like a thing that Ben and I do as a side project. And then Brian McLaren actually named it in his talk on Saturday. He said that Christianity needs R&D zones. And the reason is that we've lost the creative messaging that Jesus uses. So we've repeated the same things, but in a dry, and then Article 1, be nice to people. And Article 2, be nice to God, I guess. And, and so we've sterilized something so vibrant and creative and groundbreaking and revolutionary because we've taken it out of its countercultural media. We've taken it out of the ways in which it defied expectations. And what I've like long said early into thinking about being a pastor, I think people expect that I'm out to like make non-Christians into Christians. And I'm like, no, I'm out to make Christians into Christians. I think that'd be a revolution. But I think one of the neat things about, as John said, the good faith of the Methodist Church in funding something that wasn't necessarily going to ever give back to them is that they ended up with R&D. And what we had in the room yesterday was 60 pastors, leaders, innovators from all over the state who came here, yes, to listen to Brian, but to listen to Brian in our context, and then to ask us questions about how we do what we do. And we get to go to different conferences, we get to go speak at different events all over the state, Southeast recently, and we get to share with them what we're able to do in this tiny little microcosm of DeLand, and try to see like what can be replicated somewhere else. And so it's not just that what we do here benefits these people in this room, but it does. A spiritual community in the 21st century will be judged by the benefits it brings to its non-adherents. And nobody who saw us in Atlanta is going to come back in this room and benefit from it directly, but there are people benefiting from it all over the state and all over the Southeast now because we've been able to share our experience and the words of you all and your experiences in coming here and finding a community and a school of love. So I think that's been so much more than it seems to be on paper. It's been really powerful.
Anything that Brian McLaren was talking about challenge kind of the structural DNA of collective in any way? Did it fundamentally say this could be off? This could. I mean, it sounded like it was fairly well aligned, but was there anything that said,
That's a good question. Yeah, that was a really good thing. I've not heard that.
So good.
He said that the acronym that he uses, especially for like startup organizations, is time, and so the resources are time, intelligence, money, and energy. And he said you typically are low on one, and it means you have to supplement with the others. And if you're low on time, you need more of the other three. If you're low on intelligence, you need, that kind of thing. What are you implying, Dan?
Dan would like to remind us to all take some days off.
That's right. No, I couldn't. My Freudian slip. Yeah, I don't know. I think maybe that, and that come up. I think that came up in response to, I think the dysfunction of leaders in startups, and that especially when startups are low on money, they tend to burn out time and energy for the most part. That they way overcompensate. Yeah, David, jump in.
I think when Brian's talks were going on, what we found out is that it was more affirming than it was challenging, but yet to the Fresh Expressions group, and there were some people outside of Fresh Expressions, there was a Presbyterian person here, it was like, oh, there's another way. And it was challenging to them to get the firm to see it in action here.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think the thing that was both challenging and affirming most for me, and this has been a tension that we've lived in, I think, since day one because of the nature of what I was doing before this, and then intentionally getting connected with the largest mainline denomination in the world, which is the Methodist Church, and I don't think it gets much more straightforward than this. I mean, we live in the tension of old wine and new wineskins, and the threat is always that there will be tearing, and I think the challenge is for us to try as hard as we can for as long as we can not to tear. And so, for me, the most challenging part of the book, which is what he talked about yesterday morning, is the tension between institutions and movements, or what he calls organized religion and organizing religion. And he made a great point that, at the time in history when Christianity has the very worst reputation possible. It's the time when an organized version of spiritual communities is most needed to make change ecologically, to make change economically, that we need to be organized. We obviously can't count on the government to do it for us. And so his point is the power of spiritual communities leveraged for the common good is staggering. And yet people are leaving organized religion in droves and saying, well, we don't want any organization. And so I think that is challenging. And it was, I think, both affirming and challenging for me, again, and this is something, you know, the leaders of Collective have agreed on every time it's come up for the last 5 years, is that our relationship with the institution of the Methodist Church is maybe one of the most important relationships we have as a congregation. Not because we're all the same, not because we agree with everything they do, not because our theologies align, but because the way that change happens, and it's part of the R&D thing, is that we have to stay connected to the structures, and he did a great job of explaining how, you know, movements will fizzle out if they divorce from institutions, and institutions will calcify and die out if they don't maintain the energy of new movements, but they have to have one another. And so I think, you know, the younger, you know, immature kind of revolutionary side of startups tends to say, well, you know, we've got it figured out, so screw the man, we're going to go kind of do it on our own. And it's just not workable. I think the difficult but more mature thing to do is to figure out how to maintain the relationship and our integrity at the same time, which is where the rub comes from. Lisa, and then back to Jerry.
I think it goes back to something that you said earlier, about, you know, people asking, well, how do I get involved in Collective?
Yeah.
I think that is one of the main things that speaks to how things move toward the 21st century. The idea of being involved in Collective is something very different than being involved in another church. When you go to another church, first of all, when someone says like something about church, people say, well, I go to this church, or I go to that church. Whereas quite often when you talk about Collective, someone will say, I'm involved in Collective.
Yeah.
It's because it is something that's involved. Involved doesn't mean just that we volunteer to serve coffee, or that we're part of the ladies' auxiliary, or we go to the men's prayer breakfast. Involved means that, but involved means that we're actually involved in the organization.
Yeah.
We're involved in the direction of it. We all of us here in this room are involved in where this is going.
Yeah.
And it speaks volumes that you don't have that, this is my church and I'm in control. But that has a lot to do with, you know, the millennial approach to things is very different to what we've all grown up with. With organization means that it's a top down,
Right.
There's the big cheese and the next row of cheeses, and you know, and we're all, and those of us sitting in the room are the pasteurized processed cheese food. And whereas it's not a lack of organization, it's the organizing, but it's a different type of organization that allows many more people to have their fingers in the pie without someone's ego being, you can be the pastor of the church and not be the CEO.
Yeah.
And that makes a huge difference. And so it's the overarching involvement of everyone that makes such a huge difference. I'm sorry, I'm bad.
No, I think Jess particularly appreciate the cheese metaphor. Thank you.
God, I love cheese.
They love the cheese. Yeah.
I actually want to agree very much with what she's saying, because we've been doing Collective for like 4 years maybe.
Isn't that crazy?
Yeah.
What are we doing here?
Something like that maybe, I don't know. But I've seen how many people come in and contribute and change the organization in a positive way, and that's been, like community groups that formed because of that, and even just the way that we form our church has changed, I think, due to the people that are part of it.
Jerry, Bill, Heather, somebody keep me honest here.
I was going to say what she said.
Okay. Cheese and all.
But basically, the impressive thing to me is that I guess if I do pray, I'm not sure I do or not, or don't let me get comfortable. Don't let me make this a cozy little habit.
Yeah.
Talk to the same people, and don't let me make this place my security blanket.
Yeah.
my wife and I walked away. We didn't run away. We didn't leave in a huff. We walked away from 2 churches where we can't do any work here. You know, to me, the saddest words in the Bible is Jesus could perform no miracles in that town because the people just had they didn't want it.
Yeah.
So it wasn't like I was seeking comfort and my favorite hymns and all that, jazz. It's like, well, what can I do? What job is there for me?
Yeah.
Besides being an usher, serving spaghetti, or, And this place is like an incubator. As Lisa kind of mentioned too, that if the general falls down, there's somebody to pick up the flag.
Yeah.
He falls down, somebody else. If you guys take off and go to Oregon of all places, we're not left bereft.
Right.
And
you got Kathy.
It's an incubator of participation.
Yeah.
But not just in chores, but in life.
Yeah.
In living things.
Yeah, what was it, he said 3 things on Friday night. Brian said that religion at its best provides purpose, meaning, and one other thing. But yeah, I think what is belonging? Yeah, purpose, meaning, and belonging. And I think a lot of times, the people that leave church that don't leave in a huff, or they don't leave over a split or a massive theological disagreement or whatever, I think most of the time when they leave, they may have a sense of community or belonging, but like you, they're showing up to do something. They want to feel like there's significance, and if they're maintaining, sort of making the coffee and vacuuming the carpets in an organization, but there's not a sense of purpose or a deeper sense of belonging, or that what they're doing is meaningful other than just helping an institution to survive, but it's not sort of calling them beyond themselves and pushing the organization beyond itself into the community, then yeah, it seems, I think people are, the attrition is due to boredom in a lot of cases. But yeah, I appreciate the acknowledgement of the way that we say it every week. Your presence makes us who we are. I can't imagine trying to do the top-down thing, because I'm not creative enough, and I think it would just be exhausting. But I think, Bill is a great example. Bill's come around, and I think how long have you all been around? 8 months, 10 months? A year. In the time you've been around, I think you've offered to lead 4 or 5 different community groups. That's not, I'm not going, oh, this is a great book that I read. I need to find the right person to first read the book and feel as strongly about it as I do, and then I need them to be the one to go and lead. I'm kind of doing what I do, and Bill's like, hey, this is great. We should do this. And that's both listening, it's the people who are leading Collective listening to the voice of Collective and making it what it is, but then it's also willingly giving the leadership over to the people who are saying, this is what we want, this is what we need, and odds are there are other people in the room who are interested in that.
Bill, then Heather.
What are we talking about? Bill, then Heather, okay.
We just spent the weekend with James Finley. For those of you who don't know who he is, he was a novice in Thomas Merton's monastery. Merton was probably one of the most famous monks or well-known monks of the 20th century. And now he's a PhD in like field psychologist, and he did a weekend on how mysticism or meditation can heal trauma. And he said 3 things. I mean, he said a lot more, but he summarized what he said in 3 ways. He said, find your teacher, find your practice, and find your community.
That's Buddhist. So good. It is. Dead on.
And if you do that, you will heal. And even if people never knock on the door of this place, if they meet one of us, somehow or other, because you don't just offer a teacher, yourself or others, every week you're introducing us to somebody new.
Curating the teachers.
Yeah, and even if people bump into us on the street and they say, well, where do you go, or whatever, and it comes up, somehow or other we're going to infect them with that, because we get infected with that positivity, a positive kind of a virus. And that's a gift. A lot of churches you go and you don't get that message. So, even non-adherents, and if they come, they'll receive it even more.
Yeah. Beautiful.
Well, I was reminded of something Dan said at his, when he was speaking about how traditionally we have often gotten our values from the church. And I think, and Lisa, when Lisa was talking, she reminded me, you know, generations that are emerging now into positions of leadership, they don't want people to give them their values. And what we do at Collective is we challenge our values and we examine our values. And the values that we end up with are those that are really tested.
Yeah.
And I think they're more valuable for that. And I think that's, you know, that kind of ties those two things together.
So good.
To that, I think we make it a point to say when you're finding your teacher, also be your own teacher.
Yeah.
Because, I mean, the way that we practice Occupy Trilogy, the fact that we have discussion every week, like the heart of our practice is to find that we all have wisdom to offer, like all the wisdom necessary is already present in the room, and that we be each other's teacher. Bill's my teacher, for sure, every day. In fact, like, you know, there's not a cheese hierarchy because I have to-do list items that go, get back to Bill about. He'll tell me what community groups we're doing, and then I have to just figure it out for him, you know. But it's really neat that we can somehow assemble a community that has the ability to care for each other. We got the question yesterday. Somebody at a church in Florida somewhere said, well, you know, do you still have to do all the church things? Like, what about pastoral care? And we're like, well, yeah, like we do that. And then also we do that for each other in this room. Like while we were in our time together yesterday, somebody said, hey, I have a Thanksgiving basket. I think I'd like to take it to this person. Can you give me their address? Because they were already on it. Like we don't have to orchestrate that sort of thing because you've grown to appreciate and respect each other's opinions, but also to support each other's lives. And know that this is a person I should check in on this week because I heard them say that to me last Sunday. And so there's not the need for the, fancy cheeses? What are we? The string cheeses, whatever we are. There's not a need for us to be like, oh, here's our list of people to care about.
Right.
Please care about that list with us. We'll tell you who to care about this week. No, like, you know how to do that organically because that's how we try to orient ourselves in our conversations.
And I think that, you know, the example, for me, the last couple of years of hurricanes has been, you know, you talk about organized religion, and I think the difference between, like, I need to create a discipleship structure where I guarantee that over the next 2 years, everyone takes the same classes so that they've all been exposed to the same sort of theological stuff that gets poured into them so they can all say the same things when they're asked the right questions, is like the old form of organized religion. Like we put the factory together and move the products down the assembly line and everybody comes out the same. And I think the thing Brian's getting at is, you know, organized religion at its best is we got people who are pissed off because they got chainsaws and they want to help people and they can't get in touch with who they need to help. And we need to organize how they get to people's houses, to get up on their roofs and, you know, chop trees down and like, how can we get out to help people? That's what we want to be organizing, not telling you what you've got to believe or else you're not right. And this is why you do belong or don't belong. And those are such different ways, I think, of conceptualizing spiritual community. And I think the way that we care for each other is a huge piece of that. And I said, you know, when the question came up yesterday, I said, I think very often I am like the last to know when someone's in need. And I hear about it from other members of Collective who are like, oh yeah, so-and-so's got whatever, and we've already set meals up and stuff. And like days later, they'll be like, oh, should we do a meal train through Collective and get meals to the person in need? And I'm like, yeah, that sounds like a good idea. But it's because it's already being taken care of very organically.
There was one of the points that Brian made, I don't remember if it was Friday night or Saturday, that he talked about how we are called to create the church of the future in the existence of the church of the past and the church of the present.
Yeah.
And I think that the way that we operate really is very futuristic because it adds momentum or movement to what's referred to in the Episcopal setting as the priesthood of all believers.
Yeah.
And so I think that is watching that in action is one thing, but watching it in action in the lives of other people who really are the benefactors of it. That's a really neat and beautiful thing to watch and behold.
Yeah, definitely.
There was a hand in the back.
Yes, I forgot your name. Go ahead, and then I'll hit you, Robert.
Sound versus college. But anyway, this is an awesome environment. I think diversity in this room is divine, and I think it fosters the critical thinking that we need in today's world. And it's very enjoyable, and I appreciate being here.
Awesome. Thanks, Cindy.
Yeah.
Glad you're here. And Zane, thanks for helping out last week again. Robert.
When I first started, and you can correct me if I'm wrong.
I wouldn't dare.
No, you will. You were very hesitant to use the word church.
That sounds right.
About 2 years ago, 2.5 years ago. And my first service was when Angela's mom was talking about finding spirituality in nature. And then the next day was Rajani speaking about mythology and that sort of stuff. And for a while, probably the first year, it always felt like misfit faith. It was this amalgam of things, and we didn't really know where it was going. And I specifically remember the day when you said in the microphone, "This is Christianity." And a lot of people kind of went, "Oh, he said the word."
Can't go back now.
He said the word. And to be totally honest, I was one of those people. I was like, oh man.
The most successful bait and switch of all time. The longest game.
Okay, so, but we stuck with it to find a different interpretation. And I kind of feel like, Collective has established itself. That we're not the newbie. So we don't necessarily need to compete with other churches as much as, like, you mentioned the homelessness and the hunger stuff. I would like to see us participate in that hunger walk as just another organization.
Yeah.
And I think people would see a lot more of like, not to get more people in the door, but just so that, I don't know if you guys have the same experience. When you try to tell people what this is, they don't get it. And it kind of morphed from misfit faith, like figuring out what it is, to misfits finding faith. Like people coming from different angles to focus on this one thing.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's been, just in the last year, and honestly, like, in terms of how we organize, having the help of additional staff, like we've been able to do stuff at the soup kitchen at First Methodist where we've been across the street for 3.5 years and just never pulled it together, and it's been awesome. The turnout's been overwhelming because, and to your point, it's not, I think it's some of the gift of the Pete Rollins stuff is the acknowledgement going in that us serving is for us. It's not for them. Like they're gonna get their meal, either way. And so it's not to be self-congratulatory as much as it is, we want to be the kind of people who put ourselves in the presence of hungry people who are on the side of the table that are doing what we can to help them get a meal. Yeah. Yeah, because we got people with chainsaws. That's not a threat. I hope Dave's not watching. All right, so real quickly, let me just run through here, and I'm gonna jump back to the middle one. But hold on. So the three kind of main ideas of Brian's stuff this weekend, based on his book, The Great Spiritual Migration. So he talked about these movements in the religious landscape, but primarily Christianity. So the move from a system of beliefs to a way of life, and we've talked about that, I think, a lot here. That the end game is not that we all agree on the objective kind of belief statements, but that we do this. We come into the same room. We acknowledge that we're not the same. We acknowledge that at the end of this, we're going to get up and leave, and none of us are going to think the exact same thing or believe the same thing. But the deepest belief, the deepest loyalty is that what we're doing is important. That's the core that brings us back here to keep doing it. So the beliefs versus way of life. The second, the theological migration from a nonviolent image of God, or from a violent image of God to nonviolent. And he did some really, really good work on how the way we read the Bible matters in terms of how we get free of the violent image of God. I'll probably come back. That'll show up in a sermon here pretty quickly because it was really, really compelling. And the last one is, he calls it missional. I don't really like that word, but the technological migration, so what we've been talking about most of the night tonight, from organized religion to organizing religion and that relationship between movements and institutions. So I know we're running low on time. I'm going to jump over here and do the thing with the bread.
Because you've got magic hands.
Yeah.
So Brian McLaren speaks internationally. He speaks
Right.
all over the world. At the very end Saturday, he said he wanted to say something that really tickled him from Friday night. And that's that Ben did the pitch for the pledge drive. And he did it to the Saturday group. And that impressed Brian.
That was the highest compliment of the weekend of his engagement with Collective. I was like,
so just to reinforce again, pledge
Yeah.
drive, that, you know, that, he said that it's so important and most people don't do that.
yeah, and the relationship with the institution and movement, you know, he sort of said very often the most successful movements die as movements because they don't achieve sustainability. They fizzle out and inevitably hand power back to institutions because they can't go on. And so he said doing what we're doing in terms of the pledge drive, achieving sustainability is maybe the most important thing that we'll do at this phase in the life of this organization, because otherwise it will sort of be the startup that eventually fizzles and sort of hands power back to the Methodist Church as it is, or Christianity as it is. And so that sustainability is a huge piece. I'm going to keep this quick. I actually heard this from Rob Bell not too long ago. The theological migration from violent to nonviolent. He said when we do this with the bread and the wine, very often the very worst interpretation is that Jesus dies to make God less grumpy. And that's atonement theology in 3 seconds. And he says instead, the love feast, the Eucharist, the good gift, the sacred table, is the one that we set every week. And it's the table of the community that you guys have been talking about all night tonight. It's the one in which we understand God is most fully present, not up in the sky, out in space, punitively waiting for you to step out of line, but in the breath of the person next to you. In body and in blood, present with us, but present in us, present through us to one another, for one another. This is the body. This is the blood. It's yours, it's mine, it's ours. It's God's in and with and through us. This is the table we've set tonight, as always, open to us and open to all people. And no one will ever be turned away. When you're ready, feel free to come and grab a piece of bread and dip it in the cup.